Last week, I did a tier list ranking for Film Bro movies. So this week, I decided I'm going to be ranking chick flicks. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of chick flicks out there to choose from. Way too many to do in one video, so I decided to just narrow it down to these specific movies. All right, so starting off, we have Barbie. So the big criticism of Barbie is that the movie is basically a toy commercial. And the second big criticism of Barbie is that sometimes it kind of just monologues the theme straight to the audience, which can be a little bit annoying. I do think that those are both true to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, I think you could say the same about a lot of other movies. Like a lot of blockbusters are toy commercials. Like, let's be honest, Star Wars, some of my favorite movies of all time. I love Star Wars, but like those are kind of toy commercials, especially once you go farther down in the series. As for the movie, like kind of monologuing the theme straight to the audience, is it annoying? Yeah, but at the end of the day, Barbie is fun. It's a fun movie. I actually saw the movie probably like twice in theaters. I've since watched it twice since it was released. I will admit it, I have seen Barbie 4 times. It's like a comfort movie. I love Barbie. It's so fun. It's just like a really nice movie to watch. It never fails to entertain me. I don't think it's an S tier movie. I think there are better chick flicks, and if you don't like Barbie, I get it. There are very legitimate reasons to dislike Barbie, but I don't know. There's not much that I can really add to the conversation when it comes to Barbie. The movie has been analyzed to death at this point. It's super fun, great soundtrack, great visuals, great production. Greta Gerwig is a great director. It's an A tier. All right, so the next one up is Cruel Intentions. If you've never heard of Cruel Intentions, it's one of the trashiest movies that Hollywood has produced in the last 20 or so years. Actually, it might be older than that by now. I'm not going to spoil the movie, but the general premise of the movie is that there's two step siblings and they make a bet with each other where the guy has to seduce Reese Witherspoon's character, and if he wins the bet, then he gets to sleep with his stepsister. It's a really trashy movie. 25-year-old high school students, people doing cocaine off rosaries. I mean, it's just a ridiculous movie, but I have to admit, it's fun. It's so like ridiculous and trashy, but it's just one of those movies that like, it's delicious garbage is what it is. So I'm gonna put Cruel Intentions in B tier. If you were to analyze Cruel Intentions critically speaking, you could make an argument for being an F tier. I wouldn't blame you, but it's just one of those movies where it's like, it's a bad movie, but like, it's just so fun to watch. It's one of the best trashy guilty pleasure movies. All right, so up next is Idea of You, and the only reason I included this is because the movie kind of came out pretty recently and I saw it pretty recently. In like 5 years from now, probably no one's even going to remember this movie. So if you haven't heard of Idea of You, basically it's kind of like this fan fiction-y type of story about a 40-year-old woman who has a relationship with essentially a fictional version of Harry Styles. It's a really dumb movie. Honestly, my biggest problem with the movie is there's like this fictional boy band in the movie. I forget what they're called, but like they're like the most generic ever. I'm not just talking about like the type of generic pop music you'd hear in the top 40. It's even worse than that. It's like the most mediocre, mundane type of pop music ever. And I get it. Like if you're making a fictional band for a movie, you're not going to be able to make it as good as like the top artists working in the industry. But like they didn't even at least try to make like something original. It's like the most bland and generic band ever. Like if the band would have been like something that was like similar to like, I don't know, like Death Grips or like some crazy like that, I would have loved this movie just as like a ridiculous guilty pleasure. But because they just decided to go with the most generic pop band, and I get it, I'm not the target audience, but like, come on, you could at least try, like at least do something a little more interesting with the music. I would have been able to let that slide. But later on in the movie, there's a scene where they compare the main character to Yoko Ono. By doing so, they were comparing this really mediocre band to the Beatles, which is like, it just made me roll my eyes. Like, really, you're going to compare this to the Beatles? Outside of all those like a little annoying nitpicks that I have about the movie, I will admit the movie is kind of watchable. It's a decently well directed movie. Anne Hathaway is a great actor. She does a great performance in this movie. It completely carries it, if I'm being honest. So it narrowly avoids the F tier, and I'm gonna put it in C tier. Okay, so next up we have Mamma Mia, and this is one of the craziest, most ridiculous movies I've ever seen. Mamma Mia, I kid you not, is weirder than any David Lynch movie. Like, it is just an absolute fever dream of a movie. I can't do justice to it just describing it. The musical numbers are just absolutely insane. From what I've heard, the cast was drunk half the time they were filming this movie. Pierce Brosnan is a terrible singer, but honestly, like the movie is just so much fun to watch because you can tell that the actors were just having so much fun filming this movie. I'll also add that I love ABBA, and honestly, like anyone who doesn't like ABBA, like I would have to question whether you're even a human at that point. Like, who doesn't love ABBA? So Mamma Mia, ridiculous fever dream of a movie. It is very silly. You know, honestly, I'm going to rate it as a B tier because honestly, it is a borderline A tier, honestly. Like, Mamma Mia is a really fun movie to watch, I mean, it's not like a good musical by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, it is just an absolute blast to watch. Okay, so up next is She's All That, which is a 90s high school movie, and I forget the exact name of the trope. I think it's called like Born Sexy Yesterday or something. It's like the prime example of using that trope. It's like one of those movies where like the main character, she like takes off her glasses and like puts her hair down, and she all of a sudden goes from being like this like invisible loser to like the hottest girl at the school. It's a ridiculous movie. It's really dumb. It's very of its time. It is kind of watchable as just being like a trashy like guilty pleasure high school movie, but even in that category of movies, it's no Cruel Intentions. So I'm gonna put She's All That in C tier just because it's watchable. Like, it's not like an F tier unwatchable movie. If you have nothing else to do, She's All That is not the worst way to spend an evening. Up next is Mean Girls, which is arguably the Citizen Kane of chick flicks. I mean, who doesn't love Mean Girls? Like, everyone loves Mean Girls, and there's a reason for that, because it's extremely funny. It has one of the best scripts ever. It's extremely quotable. Come on, Mean Girls is S tier. Like, Mean Girls is the definition of an S tier film. I've never met a person in my entire life who doesn't like Mean Girls. I'm sure there's people out there who exist, but all right. And up next is Heathers, which is kind of actually very similar to Mean Girls. It came out in the 1980s, except it's like a much edgier version of Mean Girls that involves murder. And I actually think that Heathers is just as good as Mean Girls, if not even better. I wouldn't say that it's better than Mean Girls, but it's neck and neck. Like, it's a really funny movie. It's also extremely quotable, just like Mean Girls. Like, honestly, if you haven't seen Heathers and you're a fan of Mean Girls, then you need to watch Heathers, because like, it's literally Mean Girls except with murder. Super hilarious, super quotable movie. Absolutely love Heathers. That's an S tier. Up next is The Devil Wears Prada, another classic of the early 2000s. The Devil Wears Prada is a really funny movie. It's really entertaining. It's got great characters. Emily Blunt's character is my personal favorite character in the movie. I find her to be extremely hilarious in that movie. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have any like complaints about Devil Wears Prada outside of like Anne Hathaway. She's like the main character. Her friends are just like the worst friends ever. Her boyfriend totally sucks. Outside of that, it's pretty much just like a perfect chick flick. I'm gonna put it in A tier alongside with Barbie, just because I don't think it's as good as Mean Girls or Heathers, but it's a great movie. Okay, and then we have Legally Blonde, which again, I love Legally Blonde. I love any movie that involves like a fun person just kind of owning a bunch of like pretentious snobs. I don't know why, but I like movies that do that. Legally Blonde, it's a very dumb movie. It's a very silly movie, but it's really enjoyable. It's really funny. It's got a lot of great scenes, great characters. That's an A tier for sure. And then up next we have Clueless, which is also another classic of the genre. And yeah, Clueless is great. I absolutely love Alicia Silverstone's character. She's really funny. It's not really like a super interesting narrative or anything. It's just a movie that's carried by great characters, great writing. And yeah, it's just a really fun, enjoyable movie. I'm gonna put Clueless in A tier. It's not as good as like Mean Girls or Heathers, but it's a classic, easy A tier. And then we have 10 Things I Hate About You, which I haven't seen that in a really long time. Yeah, I think it's obviously like an adaptation of Shakespeare. I don't know. I haven't really looked into it. I think it's Taming of the Shrew. I've never read Taming of the Shrew. 10 Things I Hate About You is a really fun movie. It's really enjoyable. One of the best like of its type of movies. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen it in so long that I don't have much to say about it, but I remember really liking it when I did see it. So that is an A tier for me. And next up we have The Notebook, which this might be a hot take, but I'm not like really a huge fan of The Notebook. No shade to the people who are fans of The Notebook, and nothing really against the movie. It's just not really my thing. It's a little bit too serious. When I watch chick flicks, I like to watch the more like fun, comedy oriented ones. The Notebook, it's like a straight up capital R romance movie, and like those can be great, but just not usually the type of movie that I'm super into. For me, The Notebook, it's not a bad movie. In fact, I would say it's a pretty good movie. I haven't seen it in a really long time, so I don't know. I'm just gonna put it in B tier because it's not really my thing, but I do think it is a good movie. And then we have Easy A. I really liked Easy A back when I did watch it. I watched it so long ago. I don't even remember it. It's been years, but it's basically like The Scarlet Letter except turned into like a 2000s comedy movie. It's a really funny movie. Emma Stone is a great actor, obviously. And like, yeah, I mean, you're taking the plot of The Scarlet Letter, which is a classic novel, and you're adapting it to a modern time. That recipe is usually a very solid mix, especially when you just have like a well-made movie with a really good actor. So Easy A is an A tier. And then we have Freaky Friday. I've seen like a decent number of those kind of like body swap movies. Like, I don't know, I can't even remember their names because most of them are extremely forgettable. But Freaky Friday is, out of all of those type of movies where it's like two people like swap bodies, but it's like their, I don't know, their mind goes into the, I don't know, it's a silly concept, but like out of all the movies that have that sort of plot line, I do think Freaky Friday is probably the best one. Jamie Lee Curtis, great actor. Lindsay Lohan, she was great back in the 2000s. Freaky Friday is a solid B tier for me. I think it's a good movie. And then last up, we have Anyone But You, another movie that is probably going to be forgotten about in like 5 years or so, but just because it came out recently, I saw it recently, I decided I was going to add it to this list. And this might be a hot take, but I did not like Anyone But You. Honestly, like, I didn't really have any major criticisms of the movie outside of the fact that it's just boring for me. At least it was for me. I'm sure a lot of people found it really entertaining, but I was bored off my ass watching that movie, and I like Sydney Sweeney. I like Glenn Powell. I think they're both really good actors, but yeah, the movie was just kind of lame for me. I don't know. I didn't find it that funny, and like that's like the worst crime that a movie like this can commit, is by being boring. So for me, Anyone But You is an F tier. I don't do D tiers. Like if you don't get it, if you're not at least mid, which is like a C tier, then you're an F tier. Yeah, anyway, that's my final ranking for these chick flicks. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and see you next time.